Quality Control Music, or simply QC, an American hip-hop record label founded by Kevin Coach K. Lee and Pierre P. Thomas in 2013. For a moment, Quality Control was the future of hip-hop, not just a label, but a movement. Their artists dominated the charts, filled arenas, and practically lived on every party playlist in America. The Migos brought in a new sound that reshaped trap music. Lil Yachty made being weird profitable. City Girls gave voice to an entire generation of young women, even if negative. And Lil Baby, he became the people's champ, seen as natural successor to the greats. QC felt untouchable, a factory that could turn cultural moments into platinum plaques. But like many factories, it was built on production more than preservation. And when the hits stopped coming, the infrastructure began to crack. Behind the glitz was a machine that moved fast, but maybe too fast for its own good. Founded in 2013 by Coach K and P, QC positioned itself as the label that got it. They weren't some out-of-touch corporate execs in suits, they were from it, in it, of it. Their artists had creative freedom, the visuals were polished, the timing sharp, and by 2017, with the Control of the Streets Volume 1 compilation, QC had officially arrived as the premier hip-hop label. But by the time Volume 2 dropped just 2 years later, things already felt different. The label that once moved in sync was now fractured. The Migos were no longer the trio that revolutionized flows. Takeoff was gone, Offset had gone solo, and Quavo's star was fading. Yachty's buzz quieted, JT and Young Miami weren't seeing eye to eye. Even Lil Baby, the golden child, grew distant from the label despite being their most marketable act. And behind the scenes, reports of internal tension, miscommunication, and money disputes started to surface. QC wasn't lacking talent, it wasn't even lacking hits, but somewhere between chasing the next moment and managing the last one, they lost the identity that made them special. The empire built on authenticity began to look more like another music business caution sign. Not because they didn't win, but because they couldn't stay winning. Today's feature is the rise and fall of one of hip-hop's most promising collectives, Quality Control. The label that once controlled the streets but couldn't control its own identity. What happened? Let's talk about it. Salute to Twin on IG for this request. It's your boy JC StuntedGrowthMusic. Let's get it. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Quality Control Music was founded in 2013 by Kevin Coach K. Lee and Pierre P. Thomas, two industry veterans who'd seen enough from the sidelines to know they could run their own table. Coach K had managed Gucci Mane and Young Jeezy, while P came from Atlanta streets with an ear for talent and a mind for business. Together, they launched QC out of Atlanta with a vision: build a label that worked with artists, not over them. Their first major signing was Migos, a young trio from Gwinnett County who quickly exploded with the viral hit Versace. QC paired raw street energy with polished infrastructure, branding themselves as the new death row of the South. With the Migos, Lil Yachty, City Girls, and later Lil Baby all in their prime, QC rapidly grew into a powerhouse. By 2017, they were behind multiple chart-topping acts with a reputation for discovering stars and letting them shine. But that shine wouldn't last forever. Stunt number 1, over-reliance on the Migos. Every label has a cornerstone. For Quality Control, it was the Migos. The trio didn't just make QC hot, they were QC. Their breakout run from 2013 to 2018 was seismic. From Versace to Bad and Bougie to Culture, they became the faces of a trap renaissance. But their dominance may have blinded QC to the risk of over-reliance. Because as much as the Migos built the label's brand, they also boxed it in. The Migos had a chemistry that was hard to replicate, but their formula was worn thin. By Culture 3, fans felt it, critics said it, even the group seemed to acknowledge it, drifting into solo work. Quavo and Takeoff formed a duo, and Offset carved his own lane. Internal friction only deepened the cracks, and then came tragedy, Takeoff's death in 2022. Not only did it shake hip-hop, but it shattered the core of QC's foundation. What followed was a slow unraveling. Quavo's solo work struggled to connect. Offset distanced himself from QC altogether, going public with legal issues and personal beef. The label's former poster boys were now moving independently, both literally and emotionally. And with them went the synergy, the cultural dominance, and a large part of QC's identity. Rather than diversifying early and giving equal push to other artists, QC stayed glued to the Migos brand for too long. The label became synonymous with one group, which worked until it didn't. By the time the decline was undeniable, the damage was already done. The Migos' fall wasn't just the end of a trio, it was the beginning of the end for QC's reign. They built the house, but the foundation couldn't survive without all three. Stunt number 2, the house that collapsed from within. At its peak, QC felt like a family. Artists appeared on each other's songs, posted each other's wins, and credited the label for giving them freedom. But behind the scenes, it wasn't always harmonious. As fame grew, so did egos, and suddenly the loyalty that built QC became a liability. The City Girls, once a tight-knit unit, began to splinter publicly. JT and Young Miami seemed misaligned in their creative directions, with solo ambitions overshadowing group chemistry. Young Miami openly expressed frustration with the label's handling of her career, even hinting at being shelved. The duo that once anchored QC's female presence now barely moved in unison. Lil Yachty's journey told a similar story. After blowing up off SoundCloud and becoming the face of bubblegum trap, his music lost its edge, and QC failed to guide his evolution. Instead of sharpening his sound or marketing a reinvention, they leaned into the quirky persona that had no longer moved fans the way it once did. Yachty was still around, but for all his branding deals and personality, his musical relevance had quietly disappeared. Even Lil Baby, the label's brightest and most bankable star, began distancing himself from the QC structure. While never hostile, his movements showed signs of independence. His own label, his own crew, and fewer mentions of QC in public appearances. The label's flagship artists were outgrowing the brand, and there was no unified vision to hold it together. What started as a well-run collective fractured into isolated brands with little cohesion. There was no shared mission any longer, just individuals chasing separate goals. QC had the talent, but it couldn't manage the fame that came with it. And in music, mismanaging egos can be fatal. Stunt number 3, the game changed, but QC didn't. By the early 2020s, hip-hop was shifting. TikTok was replacing mixtapes, personality-driven content mattered more than lyrical ability, and fans were moving faster than ever. Loyal today, gone tomorrow. To survive, labels had to evolve, but quality control, once ahead of the curve, got stuck in the one it created. QC's motto thrived on the momentum of street hits turning into cultural anthems, but that formula required constant output and flawless timing. When their core artists slowed down or lost relevance, the label had no next wave ready. They didn't develop new acts at the same clip or with the same care. Instead of building infrastructure to compete with the new age digital machines, QC stayed married to an old system that relied too heavily on star power. The label also struggled to break new ground internationally or across genres. Their identity was too closely tied to Atlanta trap and a specific era of southern rap, and when that sound faded from the mainstream, so did QC. They lacked a boundary-pushing artist who could redefine the brand, someone like a Travis Scott or Tyler the Creator. Lil Yachty tried with his experimental shift into alt-pop and psychedelic rock, but QC didn't appear prepared to support or scale that direction. Meanwhile, other labels adapted. Empire embraced independence, 300 Entertainment bet on viral discovery, even artists themselves began running their careers like startups. QC, once the label that understood the streets, no longer understood the new algorithm. In 2023, P and Coach K sold QC to Hype America, where they'd report to Hype CEO Scooter Braun, selling out like all hip-hop black-ran labels eventually do, signaling the end of their direct control. It felt less like a victory lap and more like a white flag, not because QC didn't still matter, but because they no longer knew how to. All in all, Quality Control's story is both inspiring and frustrating. They prove that labels could be built from the ground up, rooted in culture and powered by raw talent. For nearly a decade, they ran Atlanta and by extension, the sound of modern rap. But success requires more than hot records. It takes vision, structure, and ability to adapt when the wave you built starts to crash. QC had everything in place until they didn't. The artist drifted, the brand got stale, and the machine that once created stars began to lose its touch. Their fall wasn't instant, it was slow, quiet, and eventually undeniable. Still, the impact made by QC won't be forgotten. They gave voices to a generation, changed the sound of hip-hop, and reminded everyone what a label could be. They just couldn't hold on to it. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, their growth was stunted. It's your boy JC, StuntedGrowthMusic, and I'm out.